Alright, hey, what's up, guys? It's Prison Mike here, coming at you guys with another, hopefully, wonderful and informative video about formations. So this is going to be the Formations Volume 2 video here. And in this video, we have to talk about the all-important troops. So you really can't talk about fleets and about formations without talking about the actual things that comprise those formations and make them up, and that's your titans and your plane and your troops. So we've got to talk about all the basics and all the essentials, the things that matter for your troops here in this video. Before I jump into that, I just wanted to give a big shout out to our alliance. We had our first void head of state here. Went pretty well, can't complain. Let's see here. Our alliance dominated, our nation dominated, and I was fortunate enough to take home the strongest commander void solo prize as well. So the triple crown, love that. Obviously it's most important that our nation, our alliance do well, but when that happens, it's always nice to be able to keep the streak alive here for myself too on the individual scale. And this is the fourth void or frenzy now that I've won in a row consecutively, so I'm pretty happy about that too. Hopefully we'll go into formations here and you guys will see and start to get a sense of some of the things that really hopefully are making me successful in these events. And I know a lot of people are hating on Void lately for a number of reasons, and it probably comes down to three things in my mind in particular that I'm not going to go into in this actual video, but I will say, you know, for scoring 1,112,000,000, I think that, yeah, 1,069,000,000 of those points were from the kill event for me. So only about 50 million points out of this 1.05 billion were from the non-kill event portion, which is the way it should be. In my opinion, that's a sign of a good event, even though it's kind of boring and they really did not want to fight. Definitely didn't want to attack us, and it was a little hard to make the most of it, but luckily I was able to do that and really get some points, so can't complain, I guess. I wonder where I'm at here in this. Oh, yeah, so I've got a good chance of being competitive. I'm always competitive in these. I'm probably never going to win one of the actual, head of state, win all of it in a solo aspect, because there are just too many strong players that can really spend and hit hard, and I'm just not able to do that to quite that extent usually for 3 consecutive battles or events, but at least up there a little bit, and it's certainly going to be fun to try to mix it up with some of these really strong players from the other events. But anyways, what I really wanted to do is just on the topic of Void, the way I think about Void is just really like the ultimate event. It's the only event where you actually have real deaths, plundering your troops. If they die for real, which I always really like. I think it's good that happens. I just wanted to start the formations video with 2 videos here. One, this is a solo attack I did against a bunch of people, and you can see I definitely had some losses there, but that's Void, and that's fine as long as I'm killing way more troops. So I figured I would start with this, let you guys see an individual fight, formations, and it's just really good and important for people to start getting in the habit of looking at these battles and being able to start pick things out that are important and dissecting them. That way, with some time and practice, you'll be able to tell really everything that's happening in these videos, and importantly, as you're able to do that, you'll be able to deconstruct the fight, figure out what went well, what went poorly, and then what to do to counteract the things that didn't go the way you want them to. We're certainly a ways away from that. It's going to take some videos, but this is going to be a very important one as we go through all the troop stuff that really matters, and cover each individual troop, their strengths, their weaknesses, when to use them, when not to use them, you name it. We're going to get into all that in this video. And as always, I'm going to have the timestamp below and marked with bookmarks, so you guys can jump around to different portions if one aspect of this is more useful or important than another. So that was the first fight, won that one there. You can see I had quite a few fights there toward the end that they were reinforcing heavily, I think just to open boxes, and we were hitting and getting tons of kills in a couple of those, but definitely losing some troops too. And this one, as you'll see, I kind of like this one just because it's a group hit with a couple of us, and a couple people really needed to lose some troops so they can stay under the amount that they're able to safely hide for events, and so we kind of stayed longer than than normally. If you've watched my other Void videos, which I've made several, you know that normally we wouldn't be probably staying or fighting for that long because we don't want to give them some easy kills by hitting our damage dealing troops. On the left here, you can see my troops. I just hit that to show you guys too. You can actually pop that down and watch it throughout the fight to see which troops are dying exactly when too. So it's just another thing that gives you some more information. It gets in the way at times, and I didn't really want to have it up for the whole video in the way, so you guys can just kind of get a sense and see what these fights are all looking like. And again, later in the fights when they're reinforcing like this and their troops are popping in, you got shredders right in the middle there. It's just a kind of absolute cluster F, and it's quite entertaining. I just like the chaos, find it quite interesting. But as our front row is down and they keep setting more and more reinforcements, this would be the time when we definitely need to get out of there if we were worried about doing things, I guess, the quote-unquote right way and not giving up a bunch of easy points by letting them kill our damage-dealing troops. But the reality was this was toward the end of the event, and we were up well over 1 billion points anyways, and they hadn't really wanted to fight all event anyways, so it's kind of like, it's time. Let's have some fun. Who cares about losing some troops? It's a kill event, and it's the only event that you can even lose troops in, and so we want to make the most of it. So that was those 2 fights. Again, there's a whole list in there. You can see that I had some losses in quite a few of them, but it was a lot of fun. It's definitely worth it. So anyways, let's get out of this one here and go into the whole list of things here. So if you remember from the last video, this is what I showed you guys as the way I think of the fleets and really think of how your formations come into play with all these different key aspects that make up the important parts of your formation itself, and then those kind of indirect things, aspects that really matter in the fights as well, and are going to help you to be successful in addition to your formations. And if I haven't convinced you already, you definitely will see throughout the course of these videos that formations make a huge difference in being successful in so many fights. And so right here, troops, we got to talk about these today, so I'm going to go through all this in a lot of detail, so that we're all ready to go on to the next aspect in the next video. And this, I just wanted to, simple, you can see I have every single troop type available in the game here in my formation here. And there's the 4 front row, 5 middle row, and 4 back row, right? So you think of it, if you divide them up into their sections, your front row, your middle row, your back row. And so when people, and myself included here, if they ever say things for a formation like a 4-5-4 or a 2-3-2, whatever it might be, they're usually referring to, and I'm always going to be referring to, the first number is the front row and the number of troop types. The second number is the mid row, and the third number, excuse me, is the back row or long range. And as you can see here, your zombies, even though they're kind of separate from the other troops in most things, the zombies are actually still going to count for the formations aspect, at least, as a mid-range or mid-row troop. And because of that, there's 5, or can be a max of 5 in the middle. So you have 4 of each troop type plus the zombies. So 4-5-4 would be the maximum amount that you could even have. And so that's just what I'm showing here. Again, a little more detail. Your front row, which those melee troops are predominantly and classically meant to be your damage absorbing troops, which their role is more about taking damage efficiently from enemies and preventing it from hitting your damage dealing troops. Your damage dealing troops are classically your mid-range, your mid-row, and your back row troops. They're much easier to kill, but they deal a lot more damage, and so it's important to have a good balance of these things in different ways that we'll of course go into over time to really optimize your chances of kicking the crap out of whoever you are facing. And just to see again, 4, 5, 2. So I'm just showing examples of 4, 5 in the middle, 2 in the back. And for the opponent here, it'd be like 4, 3, 4. And so this was actually, I just took this too because I thought it was interesting. These are our 2 C41s. We're both really strong. And they fought each other in the last arena, which was cool to see. It's unfortunate that they got paired against each other and it wasn't in the finals, but it's always cool to see when you're 2 really strong C41s who are pretty clearly way stronger than everyone else in your nation slug it out with each other, and their formations were slightly different but similar concept, and so a good example again of 4-5-2 or 4-3-4, just for this, so the sake of getting comfortable with again, practice with when I'm referring to when I talk about that. And so just more examples, like a 2-5-4, 2-1-2. So different types of formations. This was just me hitting somebody in the mines that always has lots of uranium. So unfortunately gets attacked a lot by me. But yeah, so 2-5-4, 2-1-2. And obviously, unless you're tech, you should always have your plane and your titans there too to fight. And don't forget about those, they do matter. Again, just so you guys can see, like a 2-4-4 and 1-1-1. So different styles there. And we'll get into all that, of course. So continuing into the troop types, so this is a video, or excuse me, a picture I already showed you guys, but I just wanted to overlap the actual troops there with their little icons that you want to get used to seeing too, because they each are very specific to a troop type, and I'm going to go over each of those troop types in detail in this video, as well as we'll see, I'm just going to give them specific names that I will consistently use in every video. The reason I have to do that is because troops, as they tier up in the game, you'll probably realize that they have different names. So like bikes become raiders and have different names, and it's that way for basically everything. So the other thing just to mention about the general formation in regards to troops. So the troop formations, as I will go through later in the video, you want to think of them from the perspective of if you're sitting in your plane, like you're driving your plane here and you're looking out at the battlefield. And so the screen left to screen right will be the same for your formation. The troops always line up in the same orientation depending on which troops you're including. But it's really important to remember the enemy is the exact same way as far as if you were taking it from their perspective. So you were sitting in their plane looking out, theirs would be left to right as well. But because of that, the formations do not line up in mirror images of each other, as you can see here. So it's just important to notice, like these troops here are across from each other, across. So everything is across in the very middle. Troops are right, facing each other. Everything else is always the exact opposite because it's left to right for both people facing each other. So just most people I think already are well aware of that, but I wanted to just highlight that fact too because it can kind of matter in troop positioning and how things will line up. Again, I already showed this, but I'm just going to move forward with this topic here briefly before we get into the actual individual troops. And that's just an important distinction to make, is that your troops have a different unit number assigned to them based on whatever the game or Camel has decided. And just what that means is one of each of these types of troops equals the amount of units you can see here. So for instance, these troops here, these on the far right, these what I'll call axes or axmen, one troop equals 1 unit. However, for these, one troop is 5 units. One troop is 10, one troop is 2, one troop is 1, 5, 1, 1, 1. Maybe that's why I'm a mid-ranger, because it's much easier for math, and I'm not good at math, but in the back row, the long range, you can see one troop's 1, 5, 10, and 5 again. This number matters mainly because, so this is an example of I put all equal units, excluding zombies. Just the zombies, I didn't do that before, so exclude them. But for all 12 troop types that you see here, they all have 20k units. But the number of troops you see here is 10, 2, 4, 20, 20, 20, 4, 20, 4, 2, 4, 20. And that's, again, just because of simple math. Depending on how many units each troop is worth, these are the numbers of troops you'd have to see to each equal 20,000 units of those troops. So that's important because fleet size, when you have your fleet of 400,000, 500,000, whatever it is, that fleet is units. It is not the number of troops. So just make sure you understand. And when I'm talking about numbers down the road with for formations, include X amount of troops. That's the troop number, not the unit number. If I say troop units, then that would be referring to like 20,000 troop units versus 10,000 of like this, particular troop here, armored soldier troop. So I just want to make that distinction, and you can see that here too. So if you look at the fleet size I have there, it's 368,568 troop units technically. So the amount I actually had for this was 240,000 troop units, not 240,000 troops. The only time that would be true is if you were using all troops that specifically only had one troop equals 1 unit. And then you can see that here as well. So like if you're looking at your main hall, or here's your garage, for instance, you could see. So my wounded units, again, not troops, that's the wounded units you have, and then total units and idle units. So it's telling you that, and that's the same with these here. These are all units, they're not the actual number of troops. And then you can see again main hall here too, like total units, 2.6 mil basically. That's units, that's not actual troops. So like for Hell Kings here, I have 44,426, but you have to add a 0 because each one is 10. So I have roughly 450,000 troop units of Hell Kings there, for instance. So just understanding that terminology, this is very basic stuff, but it's important to actually understand that, because otherwise I think when people talk about formation stuff, they're not specific a lot of the time, but if they're referring to units or troops or whatever it may be, and so it can get very confusing very quickly when it shouldn't, as long as we're just very clear at defining these terms. So I already showed you basically this in other graphic representations. This is just, again, very clearly delineated the melee front row, mid row, and back row with their little symbols, so we can kind of jump into each of these troop types. And I'm going to talk about the melee first and go over all the details for that, and then we'll go over probably mid-range and then long-range last. So for each of these soldiers, I basically did some screenshots and did some editing to just make things fit a little more easily. So you could see this if you went into the game and you clicked on whatever specific workshop or camp or factory, whatever troop building has the troops, you can go in and see this for yourself. I just moved around their either use special ability or skill, whatever you want to call it, so it fit better in the picture. And then every one of the soldiers I show you guys here with these stats will be the maximum level one. So for instance, for the armored soldiers, and that's what I call these. So Ultimate Armored Soldier is the name of the T12 version of this, but the T10, T8, they all have different names. So to avoid confusion, I'm literally calling them the armored soldiers. That's what I'll always refer to them as going forward, so that it's not hopefully confusing for people which troop type I'm talking about. I'll also include the building level that unlocks the corresponding tier, so you can see that too, and that's important to think about as you level up what type of troops you're going to use, because you'll think about what troops are available. So for instance, when you hit C38, you have tier 12 available, and as we look at these compared to some of the other like T11 troops, they may be a better option for certain things. So that's where that's relevant. So again, name here for each of these that you'll see, the little insignia or icon that they have that represents them, their actual tier and the corresponding level to unlock for it, the all-important special ability or skill and what it does, and we'll see that and talk more about that. And then what's on the far right here for all these is going to be the respective stats for them. And what I've just done, when it's relevant at least, is I've standardized the stats for a standard unit, which just means because the shredders, as we'll see, have 10 units and these stats, instead of trying to think about like, okay, well there's only 2 here, so what's going on, I've just multiplied it by 5 to give you the 10 unit equivalent and given you the respective stats for comparison purposes when we think about that. I'm just taking the math out of it for people so you can see the raw data comparisons and where I'm getting those from. And I've only done it for the things that matter, like the HP, defense, attack, stuff like that for these, because otherwise, other than a few specific troops, they all have 2-second cooldowns, and the ranges, it doesn't matter. So we'll talk more in particular too about each of these reflective armor and other troops' corresponding skill or special abilities, because those are incredibly important and make a big difference in fights. So this one in particular, when taking damage, you have a 35% chance to reflect 20% of the damage incoming. So that is what I call a probability-based skill, which just means that it is not a guarantee. There is a probability, a 35% chance that whatever effect will actually occur, fire off, take effect, happen, whatever you want to call or refer to it as. So this is a probability-based special ability. So what you can see here, that is what is actually happening there. So let me pause this real quick here. So I'm going to show you guys some videos, and I want to highlight things in them. So these are test cities I'm just using for reference, and I'm just showing you guys the stats because they're not killing the exact same amount, and it's just because they have slightly different stats. I didn't have them either these at like 0 buffed up stats at all, so they're not the exact same. But again, you can see these are the armored soldiers, and I'm just highlighting here they're fighting each other basically, but what you're seeing with these arrows that I'm trying to highlight is this is what it's going to look like on the actual fight. The video that we watch for these things will fire off and show these effects or visual effects when the skill actually fires off. And so 1 in 3-ish times this seal will probably fire off, 35% chance. And reflecting damage, what happens there is you're not taking 20% damage, you're reflecting it back on them. So I think of that as a 40% damage swing, if you will, or 40% damage impact total, because 20% goes back to them and you block 20 versus, or excuse me, reflect 20 versus some of the skills we'll see where it's like a block. That block percent is the flat amount. You're not sending any back at the enemy. So you can see this little orange guy here, and when that fires off, as you'll watch, you'll see that it actually does damage here and adds these little kills. That's what it's showing there. So you can see, you know, killing 5 as those things fire off, killing 5, and then I'm just showing that fired off there, and so that when it fired off on them, hit that person and then it fired off there again. And all you'd see if you watch this multiple times is that the numbers slightly change for what they're killing when that actually fires off. It was 4 on the last one, now it was 5 again, because you're reflecting 20% damage back. So that's just also to prove, again, what I'm saying, that it reflects the damage, meaning it actually goes back on the other person. So you can see that there. So this is the first, and I'm just going from screen left to screen right. That's all I'm doing here, okay? Screen left to screen right in the order for this, because this is how they're always going to align. So I just want you guys to get that in your head. Hopefully you'll be able to have that kind of, you know, memorized in no time, just from repetition. So shredders, again, the T12 version is called Hell King, but I'm calling them shredders for whatever tier they are. 37 is kind of the big level to unlock these tier 12 troops that people are a big fan of, myself included. And then 30, 22, and 16 would do the T10, 8, and 6 respectively. See what it looks like. You can see their stats here, which I will have a video, a graphic toward the end where I believe I combined all of them for reference and for comparison purposes, side by side, so to speak. This skill or special ability, defensive stance, is a damage reduction that's triggered every 8 seconds and lasts for 4 seconds, and it does a total of 34% damage reduction. So it's not reflecting damage, it's just taking the amount of damage that would come in and decreasing it by a flat 34%. And it's a guaranteed stat. So it's not a probability based. You get a 34% damage reduction for 50% of the fight, right? Because every 8 seconds, 4 seconds, or 50% of the time, you're gonna have that. So again, the shredder is the skill, and then if you watch here, you're gonna see, look, it fired off there. So you just wanna watch here. The first two, you can see the amount of damage. It was 11, 15, 23, 16, and 22, and now it's halved. It's only like 10 and 9. Back to 15, and I'm just referring to the damage again that's being done to this one here, and then half to 9. So it fires off right there, and you can see 10 and 11. Now back up to 15, 16, fires off again, back down to 10. So you can see it's 2 of every 4 attacks that come in are reduced in damage by 34%. And the reason they mirror each other exactly is because it's a as I'm trying to prove and demonstrate here, it is a guaranteed effect that happens no matter what, other than disruptors, which we'll talk about later. So that's what I'm representing or showing here for you guys. So that's the shredders. The next one in the melee is the tanks. And so these are unlocked at 34 and 40 are the 2 big ones as you level up. 34 is a very big level in general for long range because you get the cannons, which we'll talk about, and you get the tanks. And then 40 is the next version of that for the tanks and cannons. And as you've probably noticed by now, it's Camel either terrible at math or they just don't care. I don't know. But 7, 8, 6, they do whatever they want when they pick levels that things go up by, and that's why I think trying to speculate going up to 43 or 44, what they're actually going to release for troops is a completely pointless thing to do, because who knows what Camel is going to do? They don't follow any rhyme or reason, they just do whatever they want. So here though, you can see the big ones, 34 and 40 for the T11 and T13s. Stats here, which again we'll compare at the end in a way that's probably easier to really follow. And again, I'll always refer to these as tanks. The tanks have what we would call, again, guaranteed stat in that when taking, a probability stat, because they have a 31% chance or probability to block 50% of the damage that's incoming. So you can see right away it actually did that right there. It blocked twice. So that's there you can see I'm trying to just show little arrows. So you can see he's doing killing two, and then he killed one there because of that, and it's blue. It's just this blue little bubble that pops up, and 31% chance. And the reason that it wasn't the same is because it's just a probability. Each time an attack comes in, there's a 31% chance. So, for instance, this one at the beginning of the video fired twice, and it doesn't fire for a while, and that one fired, and then it kind of goes there. You're gonna see it, and then there's gonna be one over here, and it's just all probability based. So, no guarantees, and as you can tell, even though it's not showing the damage, the amount of troops killed, you can see it's 2, 2, 2, 2, and then 1, right? So 50% of the damage is blocked or not taken, and that's why the amount of troops that die is half what it was, because half the damage, half the troops die. That's all that's showing. Okay, the last of the front row melee troops, I'm going to call them, they're different type of infantry, I guess, and there's different names, but I just call them axes or axmen. Pretty obvious why. I don't think I have to explain myself on that one. So the axes, the axmen, the big levels are 33 and 39 to get those T11 and T13. And the stats you can see are over here. If it looks familiar, it's because they're the exact same as for the T13 tank. They're literally the exact same. When you add in the calculation for the amount of units, they are a little bit more unique and very important to understand, and literally Home Guard should probably explain it, because they are a guaranteed stats. So for the front row melee, there's 2 probability based special abilities or skills, and there are 2 guaranteed. The really important caveat though for the axes or axemen is, in defensive battles, a damage reduction is triggered every 8 seconds, and the damage taken is reduced by 50%. Okay, so defensive battles. That means that in most of the events and different contexts of the game, if you're attacking, this will fire 0% of the time. It will never happen. Defensive troops. So you have to watch here. These are the defensive troops. The blue are defending. The red are attacking. And as you'll see, 13 died, then 7 died because that skill fired. 6, because it's a guarantee, right? So 6 died only, and it fired off. 7. Now back to 13. Back to 13. Oh, fires off again, down to 7. And 6. And if you look over here at the red, it never fires. The amount is always relatively the same. As these troops die, they do less damage, so then the amount comes down a little bit, but it's never halved. And it's never, there's no, like you saw with the shredders at the same time, they're both firing, because it's only the defensive troops. So these in red here attacking never ever get that 50% damage reduction. Okay, that's really important to remember, because if you're attacking, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to have very many of these troops if they're not getting a very important skill or special ability to ever work. And then in comparison, when you're defending, this is a huge amount of damage debuffing. Like if you think about this, gives a 34%. So you get 16% more damage reduction guaranteed, but you have to be defending. So that's really important. And if you look at the stats and you look at the breakdown, what actually matters, I'm going to kind of go right here because it's hard to see. I apologize with the red, not super clear numbers there, but as I already mentioned, the T13s, they have the exact same HP, defense, attack when you are calculating them based on their equal units. And when you look at up here at the T12s, it's quite a bit less, right? So the Shredders have 4,000 less HP roughly, and 220-ish less defense. So the T13, not surprisingly, are going to be better in general in fights if you have them, and that concept is pretty much going to hold true for most of the different troop types in most situations, where whatever city level you are, you'll have access to certain higher tier troops, whether it be the odd number ones, the T11 or 13 or whatever maybe, or the even number, the 10 or 12. But generally, you're going to use more of the higher tier troop in your formations whenever possible. There will be a few caveats, like obviously if you're attacking, you're not going to really be using T13 axes or axmen because you're completely eliminating this, which is really important. And when you're defending, it makes sense to have a nice robust amount of these if you can, because of how good their special ability or skill is in that particular context. And again, this, the way I kind of think about it or compare it is, I think of it as a 35% chance of 40% damage, because 20% is reflected. So just as you're thinking about these numbers, 35% chance of 40% damage. And then here you're thinking of basically a 31% chance of blocking 50%. But unfortunately, with these two on the left here, the probability base can make it really difficult, because as you can imagine, probabilities can vary from one fight to another over a massive amount of numbers over like a longer time period. It really does equal out very close to that 31% or 35%. But in any given fight, especially if it's not a super long fight, this can be kind of variable, and you'll definitely see that in different contexts. And that's why it can be really hard to test this effectively, because you're not going to get the same results as you would expect in a lot of different situations. But otherwise, there's some constants we'll see and some consistent results that can kind of help guide this, that we'll certainly talk about more as we go through this. But I wanted you just to see this example for these stats comparing to each other, and then really thinking about how important those individual skill or special abilities are going to be in certain contexts. And so I just have two fights here that I just want to kind of show a common comparison. And so I'm attacking these, and I'm just going to be using slightly different numbers, as you'll see here. So I had tanks at 25,000 in both, but then this, I'm using these armored soldiers. And in the next fight, I'm using the same amount of tanks, but I'm using the equivalent amount of shredders as I was in this fight with armored soldiers. And we're just going to look at the result differences. And I've done this test many, many times, and I can honestly tell you that the results are quite variable in different contexts, and it's a bit of a crapshoot again because of the probability effects for the armored soldiers. But there are some things that I do like about about each of these, really. So I just want to show you that one there. So 375,000. We're going to jump into the next one. I have just two of these on this test in particular, and then we'll kind of jump onto the next troop type and the next troop type, and then we'll tie it all together a little bit more toward the end. But so this is, again, now shredders here, and I have the equivalent amount of shredders as I did armored soldiers to try to just kind of standardize it for this testing. And this is against a long range player. I attacked him back to back with no changes in my stats, as I always try to do, to just eliminate other factors and variables. And then we'll just see the results of this one. I have one against the mid-ranger, just so you guys can get a sense of this. But I will tell you that the results are incredibly variable at different times, and so it's hard to hang your hat on any particular example. And so all I'm showing you guys here is just the two differences. So when I had the 15.8K versus the 3.1 thousand shredders, you can see that I had 79,700 troops left at the end, so more than I did here with the armored soldiers. I only had about 4,000 less troops alive by the end of this fight, but not a huge amount. And again, I can't stress enough how this one test shouldn't sway anybody, because it's very variable. This is against a mid-range person here, so it's the exact same concept test, essentially. The only difference with this particular one is that instead of using just tanks, I use a small amount of shredders here, like 1k, and a lot more of the armored soldiers. And the next one, I just flip the emphasis to have a lot more shredders and a lot less of the armored soldiers, but again, equal unit comparisons. And so this one here with more tanks, less shredders, and more armored soldiers is going to be in contrast to the next one where I'll have more armored soldiers and, more shredders and less armored soldiers. The reason I can't just do like an outright test with like shredders and armored soldiers is I don't have enough armored soldiers even left to make a full melee amount that would be appropriate to win a fight, if that makes sense. Like I would need to probably have 3 times as many as I even have available, so that's why I'm doing it in some of these different ways. And I also really never use one front row only anyways, so all I'm showing here is that I had more shredders, less armored soldiers. Everything else is the exact same between these two, and we're just going to look at the differences against a mid-range player. There's a million things you could dissect in this video. I don't want to get into that in too much detail because I think it's going to overwhelm people, but you can see my Titan and his Titan both die there, which is common for us poor mid-rangers, just murking each other's Titans, usually always the female Titan first. And then fight will be over soon. Got some DC bombs there, some plain stuff. I will say the more things they add in this game, the harder it is to do this, and the more important. You can see every fight I have here, even the wood ones, is a recorded one because it's just impossible. It's impossible to look at a fight in the game and be able to understand it. You have to be able to pause and go back and forth and fast forward and stuff. It's just impossible otherwise. There's too much crap in the way. So yeah, this is the other one. So let me just pause it here. I should have hopefully okay, so yeah, what I have here just is the report of the video I just showed you guys, which is the 2 different formations here, the one with more of the armored soldiers, the one with less of the armored soldiers. So again, these all both have the same amount of total melee units. I'm just dividing it up differently with a focus on either more or less of the shredders versus armored soldiers to compare those two. And against the mid-range here, you can see that there's about a 28,000 troop difference in favor of this one here with the more armored soldiers and less of the shredders, by about 28,000 here in this example. And then, so just some other examples here I'm showing you guys. There's a handful of these. I'm not going to show all the actual battles themselves because it's just way too long. But just so you can see, again, using the more of the armored soldiers versus less and more shredders, how it works out for about a 12,000 troop difference in favor of, again, more of the armored soldier, less of the slightly less of the shredders. Everything else is kind of the same. Another one. So this one, I'm actually just using the tanks and shredders or tanks and armored soldiers, and you can see there's about 12,000 troop benefit, or it's better by about 12,000 troops surviving for the armored soldiers over the shredders in this one too. So it seems like for a lot of them that's the case, but then if you look here, so this is again more of the shredders and less armored soldiers. Armored soldiers at 15,000, so 12,000 more. And so then respectively less shredders, and you can see about a 2,000 troop difference here in benefiting using the armored soldiers. So that's whatever, 4 or 5 of them with varying degrees of improvement using more versus less of the armored soldiers compared to the shredders. But the rest of these now here, so if you look using more armored soldiers, less shredders, more shredders, less armored soldiers, there's actually about a 28,000 troop difference favoring using less armored soldiers and more of the shredders in this formation. This one, it's 9,000-ish troop benefit, and it's actually flipped here. But so this is the more shredders and less armored soldiers, more armored soldiers and less shredders. You can see the results just favoring, again, this one using less armored soldiers and more shredders. This is what I'm talking about. It's kind of a crapshoot. This one's almost the exact same, identical for either of them. So some favor more of the armored soldiers, some favor the shredders, some are about the same. So it's a crapshoot. And that's, again, for a number of reasons, but a big part of that is just the probability-based effects of the stat. The reason I'm showing you guys all these is because it really comes to this question here. Like, which melee troops do I use? And then why am I using them? So do I use just armored soldiers then? Do I use shredders, tanks, axes, or axmen? What am I actually using here? So the answer to this, I think, is probably going to be very nuanced, as I've already mentioned, but really, I'll just make a case for, I think, and show you some examples of why, especially if you're on defense, you're probably using all of these, a combination of all four. When you're on attack, you can make the case to use either three, or even I'll show you a reason why you would even actually use some Axmen too, even though the Axmen don't have this special ability or the skill that's applicable. It has to do more with the alignment and the formation. So there are really two reasons that I can think of why you're going to use more of these different melee troop types versus less. But before I get into that, just so the simplest answer is the majority of the troops you're going to use for your in melee are whatever one you have the higher tier of realistically. And so what that would mean is if you're at level 26 down here, you have access to the T9 tanks. So it makes sense for level 26, 27, 28, and 29 to be using predominantly tanks, and then maybe of the percent of melee units you have total, maybe 90% is tanks and 5% is armored soldiers and shredders when you're attacking, for instance. Now at level 30, you actually unlock the T10 shredders and the T10 armored soldiers, so you could make a case now to use like 90% shredders and like 5% tanks and armored soldiers as kind of the fillers on that. And then this is why I was testing in those videos and pictures I just showed you the armored soldiers and the shredders, and that's because they both tier up the same, and so they're very similar. And so what it comes down to is really the big differences in their actual special ability or skill, and so that's kind of what I'm showing you guys. But it's, again, pretty varied on which one is actually going to do better. There isn't really a comparison for these. I mean, they're the exact same, but again, on offense, there'd be no point in using a significant amount of the Axmen, so you're going to really rely on tanks. So that like level 30, 31, 32, 33, you'd be using the predominantly like shredders or even armored soldiers. But then again, at level 34, you now activate the tanks again at level tier 11. So you'd use tanks at level 34, tanks if you're at 35, tanks if you're at 36, and then at 37 you unlock T12 shredders. So at 37 you're going to use shredders. 38 you also now unlock T12 armored soldiers. So that's where T38 and T39 are, where you can make an argument again that you could use relatively equal amounts of either of these, or you could favor one or the other based on more personal preference than anything, and then a very small amount of just tanks as kind of fillers. And then at 40, again, it's tanks, and 41, it's tanks. So that's the predominant troops you're going to use, especially when attacking. Defense, these are always a good option because they have the best defensive special ability or skill of any of these troop types, because for 50% of the fight, they have a 50% damage reduction. So that's basically like a 25% damage reduction that you could average out for the entire duration of the fight, and none of these other ones are going to get to that level. So these are actually very, very good defensively, and they're the same tiering as the tanks, but they're actually available at level 39 instead of 42. So defensively at level 39, you should certainly use a lot of the Axmen. So that's the specific troop type you're going to use. Okay, now the reason why I would say using, for instance, if you're a C37 and shredders are clearly your best option based on what you have available for their stats and stuff, why wouldn't I just use all T12 shredders and not use any of the other ones? Which is a good question. So the reason for this, I found there are two reasons really. One of them is going to be formation based, and one of them is going to be wasting damage from your enemy. And so what I want to show you guys first is just, okay, so for the wasting damage for your enemies, and then I'll get into like alignments, formations, and why you can use them. So in individual fights, this matters less. But when you're fighting a group of people, like 9 people or however many it is, you have to remember that the Titans and the Planes damage stacks, which stacking means it adds up within the group. So 9 Titans add 9 different of their special abilities or their skills that they're casting against you, okay? And it's not like troops where it just averages out the damage over all of them and deals that amount. But even that is a significant amount. And so what I'm just showing you guys actually in this video here is that the first thing that hits and that you're seeing is these different effects from the female Titan. So right away after the Planes little effect, which is exploding here and here, and that you're seeing, then they fly off. That's just that graphic. The first thing that's going to be hitting in fights are the toxic tail of the female Titan. And what I'm just showing here is basically like my one female Titan hit there and killed 28 shredders, which have much more health than these do. They have 9 female Titans, all stacking these abilities, and they only killed 3 because I only had 3 of them there. So and you can actually see the other point I wanted to make with this is, so these here, the armored soldiers, they reflect 20% damage when their special skill or ability takes effect, which means they actually deal this back oftentimes on the female Titan. And so one of the reasons I really like to use these, or a percent of them at least in the fight, is because anything that deals damage back onto the Titans, especially early in the fight, is great, wonderful, fantastic. So I really like using a portion of these for that reason. The other reason that you're just using more of these front row types in general is because you want to have incoming skills that do a lot of damage wasted if possible. And what happens is when they're doing damage, if they have this toxic tail, and let's say it does 10 million damage, it only hit 3 of these and wasted all that extra damage on them that would have instead been targeting one of your other main troop types. And the same concept would be true if you're thinking of like 51,000 T10 and or 12 EMPs firing in here. If their blast does 100 million damage and it hits one of these other front row instead of maybe your main ones and wastes 25 million of that damage, that's 25 million damage that didn't hit your other troop type. And it only takes effect for 1 hit, obviously, but in close fights, even 1 hit with a significant amount of damage wasted makes a difference. It really does. If nothing else, it's going to give you time to get more kills at least, even if it's not going to change the overall outcome of the fight. And so I like to have all 4 realistically front row troops when I'm attacking against a group at least, guaranteed. Sometimes I'll use 3, but almost always 4. Partly because, again, just some extra damage wasted. Partly because I don't want these guys getting up here and hitting my side troops if I can avoid that too, which can happen if you don't have some of these extra front row, potentially. And then the other reason that I will go into a little bit more in detail now is just involving the alignments that happen with this and some of the advantages to why you can have different troop types in the front impact the fight particularly. So before I get into the specifics of that, just remember I've obviously showed this many times, but getting into how the alignments actually work. So what I'm just showing here is you should think of the alignment is always going to be based on an invisible center line. This yellow line here you can pretend is that center line. And so how it works is there's always going to be symmetry kept as much as possible through the fight based on this middle center line, that's this yellow line. And so even numbered troops, so 4 or 2, will always line up in equal but opposite distances apart from this invisible make-believe yellow line, right? So they're always equal apart. When there's odd numbers of troops, one of them will always be right on the midline, and then the other groups of troops will just be the same equal distance apart on opposite sides of this imaginary line, just showing that like here. So if you just picture this white arrow as the kind of the line, you can see the troops are just equal distances apart of this line. Because there's an odd number here, it's on the line, and then these are all equal distance apart again. So that's how the alignment works. When this changes then is if you think of subtracting out a troop type, for instance. So all that really happens for the front row, which is what we're talking about right now, the melee group, is you just shift toward the side of whatever troop you remove and keep the same organized formation. So armored soldiers, shredders, tanks, and the axmen. So if, for instance, you took away this armored soldier here, all that would happen is everything shifts to the left to fill in for that armored soldier. So now, because there's also 3, it has to maintain the alignment where now the tank is in the middle, and then the shredder and the axemen are on equal sides apart, similar to how this would look here. Equal sides, equal distances from the midline. If you took away the axemen, same thing. It shifts to the right now. Tanks would be here, shredders would be on the center line, and the armored soldiers are equal distance from the tanks away from the mid line on separate sides, and they can stay on the left and these would stay on the right. If you would take out shredders, for instance, all that would happen is this tank would shift to the midline, this would shift in, and this would shift to the midline where now the axemen and the armored soldiers are equal distance apart with the tanks on the midline. If you remove the tanks, it'd be the same concept but with the shredders. If you remove the middle 2, these 2 would just move in. So it's that simple. So for the front row, it's not really rocket science on that. And these are just examples of all the different, what I'm basically talking about. And the reason this will matter is, again, I mentioned the damage wasted concept and why you can add more troops. The other thing that happens, and is probably even more important, is that these different alignments and formations can help with some of the impact of enemy attacks. And particularly, again, because the big thing you want to try to avoid, let me pause this for a second. The big thing you want to avoid in these fights is your Titans taking tons of damage, especially early in the fight if you can avoid it, and especially if this is a one-on-one fight I'm showing here. Not as important, but in group fights, again, if a bunch of Titans are all stacking their abilities and hitting your Titans, they're going to die way faster, and it's much harder to win a fight, even against weaker opponents. And so I'm just showing this example with the Destroy Ray, which is the male Titan's skill where he launches this basically straight line blaster ray, this attack ray, and it hits everything in a straight line and does damage, and then it also does burning damage, as we'll see. Just to note, because of the different skins, it's blue when you're using this particular male Titan skin. And so let's start the fight here. So I want to pause. So good, I timed it right. So what you're literally seeing is, so it hits at 8 seconds, it hits at 18 seconds, and it hits at 28 seconds. That's just, you're going to learn as I go through these, there's timing for everything. So it first fires at 8 seconds, then it's every 10 seconds, so it fires again at 18 and 28 seconds. What you can see here is it's hitting this front troop and going across, and it's missing my Titans. It's hitting these troops here, these three. And so by doing what looks like kind of a silly formation at first, like why do I have 15,000, 15,000, and 1 and 1? The reason is because these die right away. Ideally, they die before the Titan even hits him, so he doesn't get any kills for it, because you don't want him to get the extra attack boost from that. But as I'm slowly going through here, you can see now that because he's hitting my shredders and they're over there so far on my left, they avoid hitting my male Titan there. And then I'm just showing down here too, I can pause again. This fire path is just the skill that I was talking about, the burning skill that goes along with that. And so the troops that are hit by this Destroy Ray, depending on how leveled up you have, it will take additional burning damage every second for 4 seconds. And so it can deal quite a bit of extra damage potentially to these troops across here. And remember, this is one Titan in 1-on-1 fights, but as you'll see with more Titans in the group fights, this really matters more. And so that's why even having 1 and 1 there, because I want them to die faster so that he's targeting the shredders and not targeting these two, where it would line that blast up to then hit either my male or my female Titan. And so that's why I say you may actually use all 4 in certain fights, even though the actual skill for the Axmen doesn't apply. And then you're going to see it again at 18 seconds. So right there again, you can see it blasting. And it's just hitting through here. And again, missing my Titans. It's missing, also importantly, my zombies. It's also missing my main attack troops, which are my rockets, my rocket launchers. So very important. You can see that you can use formations to give yourself a pretty significant advantage. And again, I can't stress enough how much that matters in group fights when you're trying to fight 10 or 15 people who all have their Titans in play in there. And then again, at 28 seconds, it'll fire again. Right there, you see it hits. And again, it just goes past, didn't hit anything valuable. So this person, I was much stronger than them anyways. I wasn't going to lose to this person, but in closer fights, that can make a big difference. And again, as I'm going to show you now, in group fights, so again, that plane is the first thing. The very first thing. You can see the plane, they cast their little special ability, get in the way, kind of annoyingly, and then it's the toxic tail is hitting first. And so if you look right here, now I'm showing you with this formation how it's actually, now I have it set up. So it's going to hit down here and miss all my Titans this way. So you can see the blue blast right there. And so it hits. The problem is it does hit my rockets here. So that's not ideal. So again, I'm just showing you guys, I have all 4 troops this time, including the Axmen. Part of the reason for that is because I have Aeon active, which I'll talk about, and that just absorbs more damage in general anyways. But also, if you can keep these troops alive, it will usually fire down here and miss them. It's just the Axmen are not ideal to have, and because their ability doesn't fire off or work on attacks. And then what I'm showing you here circled is called the disruptor effect, and that's why at the 18-second mark, when normally it would be 18 seconds, 28 seconds it fires, it does not fire at this 18-second mark because my plane has put the disruptor ability on Titans, which for 3 seconds prevents them from casting their skills or their abilities. And it's important, if you don't know this already, you're seeing here now, if it misses a skill, it doesn't just fire after the disruptor goes off after 3 seconds. So for instance, at 21 seconds, it doesn't shoot that skill off. It resets and has to wait till the 28th second. So it cancels that entire skill out for that entire rotation of attacks, because all these things are based on rotation and a schedule. So it's really important that disruptor skill doesn't allow that to take effect. So it only hits once, and then actually it dies before the 28-second mark, even though I'm fighting 6 people. They're not like super strong opponents. And so just one more time. So again, I'm using all 4 in this example too, for the specific reasons of absorbing extra, damage and maybe taking damage when they die. That's excessive and protecting other troops, but also even more importantly in group attacks, I'm getting rid of this stupid destroyer ray that's coming from potentially a whole bunch of titans and hitting my valuable troops. The reality though is I would also want to be moving my mid-range, which I'll talk about later, to get the main damage dealing troops I have out of the line of this too, but that's something I'll talk about later. So you can see all these troops are on fire now, but my Titan didn't get hit. And then my plane in hitting them puts on the disruptor. So at 18 seconds, they don't cast another one. And then they die before 28 seconds even matters, so I'm good. So again, why I use all 3 or 4 melee typically in fights is because of the ability to use it in a way that will protect me from special attacks from titans and other things like that, and also because I want it to take extra damage, ideally, for me, that will help a lot with wasting a couple of hits potentially and protecting my main damage absorbing troop units, which is probably like shredders right now for me. Potentially could be armored soldiers, although I don't have enough of those even left right now to be my dominant front row troop. So I'm just showing you guys Aeon here as the last little thing before this video ends, and these little purple beautiful bubbles here are from Aeon's skill, which that is Aeon is one of the warfare officers. Her breakthrough skill gives you this 1 hour every 2 days only, so you can only activate it every 2 days, but 1 hour of, as you level it up, it gives you increasing amount of a shield. So that shield absorbs damage based on the troop times its HP, and then there's a percent that's based on how the high is leveled up. So like at max, it's HP times 36, and then also because I have this one of the skins for it, which are usually expensive and not worth it, but this shield also absorbs an additional percent, and then it gets this purple little bubble guy here. So, and I will say that this breakthrough being probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite one to use when I have it available at least, which is again, it's limited, because I'm just showing you here, that's kind of the last little thing for this melee focused damage absorbing video, that this pretty strong person who can beat me by a significant amount when I don't have Aeon active. He's got almost half his, he basically has half of his troops left, 261,593 troops left. All I have here is an extra 22,000 troops and Aeon active. So 22k troops and Aeon active, and if you look at the difference now, it's a 275,730 troop difference, just having Aeon active and having 22k troops. So it's a huge difference in the amount that this can help you with in fights and really swing a battle in your favor by having this. So I just wanted to talk about that briefly because I really do like this extra breakthrough skill quite a lot. It's probably one of my very favorite officer breakthrough skills. Again, even though it's limited to only an hour every 2 days, but really, usually there's enough space between fights and things that isn't that much of a problem. And the last thing I'm just gonna leave you with here is the video itself of that, just showing the 2 fights. So showing the one where I lose and I don't have Aeon active, and then showing the difference between that and then when I do have Aeon active is just kind of the last little farewell video. So I hope this was helpful for you guys to see all this. It takes me quite a lot of time to do all this research, put all this data together, put all these videos and these things together and edit them. So I really hope it's actually helpful for you guys, because again, it takes me a ton of time and effort, but I try to do a good job and make sure I'm covering everything I possibly can. And I know a lot of this first stuff is more basic, but it's really important that we are all on the same page and understanding that. So as I build on that with more detailed videos coming up, that we're all there together on what we're understanding, and people aren't missing the basic fundamental stuff that would make all the things I'm talking about at a higher level make sense. And so this is, again, all the damage absorbing melee focused video for troops, and the next troop video I'm going to put out shortly after this one is going to be all the focus on the damage dealing troops, like your mid-range, your long-range, and your very important zombies and stuff. I just didn't want to put all that together in one video because this one's already freaking like more than long enough, and so I think it was just gonna be too much, and so I'm just gonna divide them up into two separate, you know, videos basically. So I hope this was really helpful for you guys. Please feel free to comment. Please like it if you did, and if you haven't subscribed, please take the time to do that, because again, that really helps me too, and it's greatly appreciated. So again, thanks guys. I'm gonna leave you with the end of this video here. You can see we ended a win and a strong point, and then peace out. So thanks again for watching.